Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and I am a survivor of Bob Jones University. And this is Beyond BJU Exposing Fundamentalism, which is a podcast that sheds light on Christian fundamentalism in the context of Bob Jones University. The show includes survivor stories from BJU and also Bob Jones affiliated ministries like Christian day schools, camps, and churches. The podcast also explores BJU's influence beyond the school and its impact on American society. I want to thank my Patreon supporters who allow me to do this work, and if you could join my Patreon, it would be greatly appreciated. The link is in the description of every episode. But if you feel that you can't do that, then I would appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because this helps other listeners like you discover the show. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and I am so happy to have Erin Burchwell back on the show today. It's been a while, Erin. How are you doing?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Of course, I'm doing well. I know we were dealing with tech issues tonight, but we're got it going now. It's all
Just
good.
a few.
Just a few. But yeah, I know, you came on to talk about a lot of different things. I know about the Grace Report, the 10-year mark, and also about the old promise and the new promise now.
That's right, the new promise.
Oh my gosh, so much to get into. But yeah, I would just, before you get into whatever you want to cover, if you could introduce yourself for people who are unfamiliar with you.
My name is Erin Burchwell. I grew up on the campus of Bob Jones University as a faculty brat. My parents taught there a combined number of more than 85 years. And I live in Columbus, Ohio. I took the first out-of-state job I was offered when I graduated. And I live in Columbus, Ohio. I've been married for 22 years to a Buckeye. And I have a daughter who's 17 and a great life up here in the North.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that bit about yourself. But yeah, I want to just, where would you like to start today? I know you have a bunch of notes, but I want to give you the floor to cover whatever.
So it's been a little bit, I think it's been about a year and a half since we talked last, and a lot has happened in my life personally, but a lot has happened down at Bob Jones. So there's two main topics I kind of thought would be fun to discuss today, and I'll weave them in and out with a lot of other current events. But basically, I want to talk about the old promise, and that door was flung wide open again for us to talk about when the faculty in service this year mentioned the new promise, their words, not any of ours, indicating that there was an old promise. So I want to talk about the old promise again, especially in light of events that are happening, events that might happen, the school's not doing well, etc. And then also I do want to just talk a little bit about what happened 10 years since the Grace Report. 10 years was when it was published for the first time, not the cancellation. It has a funky timeline because so much happened. But when the 10-year mark for the publishing date happened, there was some press, and I wanted to talk about some of that. And again, I kind of want these two topics to be back in the forefront of graduates, alumni, school donors' minds, because let's face it, the school is not doing well at all. Enrollment, shockingly, matched last year's, but last year's was the lowest they've ever had. I don't know how they found 400 some people to come, but they did. And, people are already talking about how much the campus is worth, what happens if it dissolves, etc. And so I think these two topics, the old promise and the Grace Report, need to be in the forefront of people's minds as people talk about divvying up that campus, probably sooner rather than later. So the old promise. First of all, when they called whatever they did, okay, let me back up.
Yeah, could you explain,
Yes.
just for people who haven't heard, could you explain just the premise of the first promise?
Yes. I'm going to refer to it from now on as the old promise.
Oh, the old promise,
New
yes.
promise now, yes. I didn't come up with that on my own. Again, faculty meeting and the new powers who be came up with this. The old promise was, I have the exact words here. It was called the Forsake Me Not Endowment, and you can find this online. And it was begun in 1990. The Forsake Me Not endowment seeks to raise $10 million by the turn of the century. The purpose of the fund is to supply financial security for those faculty and staff who've served the Lord faithfully at BJUs. Many of these servants could have obtained more financial success working elsewhere, but they chose to pour their lives into the treasures that do not fade. Also, they were not allowed to work any outside job, so they could not save for retirement. So anyways, this is what they said to churches when Dr. Bob III, and again, you can find it on YouTube, his plea for money for this fund. This was part of their salary. It wasn't like some perk. It wasn't necessarily retirement. It was something they earned by staying there and giving everything to the school, by making their spouse give everything, by making their kids give everything to the school, by not working other jobs, not even allowed to, because they were taking care of you. So this was something that we argued recently on my dad's behalf when he passed away. This was something he earned. It wasn't some sort of perk that just, oh, well, the offering dried up, because that's what they like to pretend. I had to rehash all of this stuff again because my dad passed away a year ago yesterday, September 1st.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. And for a lot of reasons that I won't go into, he had some form of dementia. My mom has Lewy body dementia. And so for 3.5 years, my dad and my mom had to live near relatives, which was Ohio. Ohio was the only place that the judge would allow them to live, is because my husband and I were the only responsible relatives near them. And so they didn't get the benefit of the discount at Shepherd's Care for quite a few reasons. Shepherd's Care does not accept people who cannot walk without a walker or need a wheelchair, which my dad did. And they don't accept dementia patients, and they don't have a locked floor. Now, if you were to just call and get a quick rundown, they would tell you they do. But I did a lot of digging and a lot of phone calls. They don't have a door that remains locked at all times, and they do not accept Lewy body dementia patients. So my parents, it wasn't of no fault of their own. They could not stay at Shepherd's Care. We found out through a really backdoor, weird way that my parents thought that their part of the promise was gone a long time ago. But when they got sick and we moved them up to Ohio, this is a true story, a faculty member, her husband still taught there, but she had been let go, very nice family, also lost out on the promise. They were in that same generation, and there's not very many left of them. She called and said, now listen, I would guarantee you your parents are part of the promise. Call this number, say these words, ask this. And so it was like this clandestine adventure to go find out if my parents had part of the promise. And ironically, my husband, who is not related to either of them, was able to call one number at school, ask if they had part of a promise, and some lady we've never heard of gave the whole rundown of what my parents' retirement was to Jason, my husband. We found out that they had a 30% and 40% discount at Shepherd's Care. I have no idea how that came about, but it was too late, and we had already done our homework with Shepherd's Care. So when my dad passed away, he had been up here in a nursing home for 3.5 years. They didn't have enough Social Security because their Social Security was based on the extremely low pay that Bob Jones gave them. And there are several people still in these tough predicaments because of the old promise being broken. So when my dad died, my husband's a CPA, and we started thinking, and if my dad had been sick with the proper sickness and had family living in Greenville, he would have gotten 30% of what the monthly Shepherd's Care fee was. So we calculated what 3 years at a discount would have been for my dad. And we went to Kevin Taylor, all the people involved in that office, and we said, listen, we're not asking for my mom. We're not asking for anything else except the money that you set aside in a designated fund. My husband's a CIA. He printed off all the this and this because that money has to go to that. And we're asking just for the lump sum to pay for his funeral. And we don't want anything for my mom, and we don't want anything, further. But he earned this money, and you allotted this money for him. So they hemmed and hawed. We had a FaceTime meeting with Kevin Taylor and his secretary, and my parents' lawyer had to log on because he was the guardian of them. And that didn't sit very well with Bob Jones because it seemed as though we had already gotten a lawyer when in fact we can't talk about my dad without the guardian present. Kevin made a remark about that halfway through. Well, that now you've gotten lawyers involved. So he was not happy. I said one thing to him and he quit addressing me. He addressed my husband in every future comment, and in every email after that, he only addressed Jason, not me. But halfway through, I said, my dad just died, and I got emotional. And I said, could you just say that you're sad that he died or that you're sorry that he died? And my husband counted, we have this recorded somewhere, and he counted many seconds of silence where he just stared and the woman behind him just stared. And I said, you can't say you're thankful for his years of service. You can't tell me you're sorry he died. And then, the meeting continued and it went downhill from there. So Kevin Taylor told us that he was going to take it to a vote, whether my dad deserved the portion that he earned. He took it to a vote with Dave Matthews, Kevin Taylor, Dr. Bob III, and Stephen Jones. And I actually had a discussion with Stephen Jones about this. That's all I'm going to say. And they voted that my dad did not deserve to get his part of the promise. They said that they've never given it to someone outside of Greenville. Well, my dad is in heaven. He's not outside of Greenville. We didn't want something right now, just his portion. That's it, because we had no other way to pay the funeral. And they could not do that for my dad after 42 years of loyal service. They could not do that. So this brought us back into all the research and all the documents that we sent Kevin Taylor about what it was. And basically he said the spirit of the promise was barge, and that went away. And, of course, we argued, but they had made up their mind. I think they made up their mind when they fired my dad and they accused him of having a bad attitude. I think that's when they made up their mind about my dad and whether he deserved his part of the promise or not. But they love to say that, well, the money's gone, so we can't do anything about it. And yet they have raised millions and millions for parking garages, gymnasiums, you name it. They have never taken a Bible conference offering for the retirees. They don't want to draw attention to it. And then they pop up this year and call their initiative The New Promise. It's hard to wrap your mind around it, except that the people who are writing this have never left campus. Like, they've lived on campus since they were children, and they live on campus now, and they have no clue what the outside world thinks about Bob Jones. That's so evident in this slogan that they've come up with. But, it does open the door back up for discussion. And, when the school closes, and it's only a matter of time, they're going to sell off property. And according to the board's handbook, which is secret, by the way, I do have a copy here, but it's secret. According to their handbook, when the campus is sold or whatever, debtors get paid first, and then they decide what missionaries and churches will get the remaining money. Now, I haven't read through the 100 pages of the board's manual yet, but I heard that they took out that part recently because they want to do whatever they want to do with the money. And I would argue the most loyal missionaries that have ever been part of Bob Jones were the older faculty who made the place, especially from years previous. If people have a good view of Bob Jones, it's not because of the administration. It's not because of the campus. It's because of the teachers they had. And so if anybody deserves a piece of that property when it's sold, I would think the first on the list should be those retirees who had their retirement slipped away from them. By the time they started compensating faculty pay, my parents were in their 60s and they had no 401k. So all their arguments of that, well, we did this and well, we did this, it wasn't enough for this one bracket of people my parents' age. It wasn't enough. And it's a small enough group that they could take one big offering or just start one fund and no one will do it. And I might add that no graduates have taken up this cause. They don't care to do it either. And it blows my mind. There have been offerings for Steve Pettit, who's making 6 figures a year at Bob Jones, gets a love offering. And these grads don't think about these retirees who don't have power in their house, don't have water in their house, can't afford the dentist. That's where my mom is right now. Can't afford a funeral. Where are all the graduates? Why is no one else worked up about this? I don't understand. But again, we've been ushered into this topic again, thanks to faculty and service.
Wow, yeah. Thank you for that overview of all of that. And yeah, I remember, back with the Surviving Bob Jones podcast when we met and started talking, I did not even like know about the promise until you brought it up and brought that to light on the Surviving Bob Jones podcast. And I feel like that's why I loved for that series bringing together so many voices. I felt like even with my own research, I just kept learning so many new things as things like started to come together. I was like, oh wow, like uncovering this rock and this is under here too. I mean, that there's so much more to be uncovered with that place. Do you know of like anyone who has said, "Oh yeah, I benefited from the promise"? Like, do you know if they actually like handed it out
So
at
what's
all?
interesting is, and we did this research when we went to ask for my dad's portion, we found multiple instances where the people did not qualify for shepherd's care. And so Bob Jones put them up in nicer and different homes around Greenville and Malden.
Uh-huh.
In one case, a faculty family, had a very bad experience on the third floor of Barge. Their loved
Yeah.
one fell, broke a major bone, laid all night in pain, and the university is still paying, as far as I know, the full bill for them. And we pointed these things out, and they said, but all of them are near Greenville. So we showed them the judge's order that says they can't be in Greenville, and it didn't matter. Basically, they've retracted the words of the original promise and they've
Yeah.
changed them so that it looks like it was just kind of a perk and it was just Barge, and it wasn't. I mean, you have to understand, not only did they not get paid enough for Social Security, their family sizes were determined by that place. They wanted you and your spouse and your kids to give everything to the university. They would only pay for 3 children to get housing, medical, and
Mhm.
schooling and food.
Yeah.
And so if you had a fourth child, you were on your own financially for that child,
Mhm.
and people weren't making enough for that. So people had only 3 kids. Look at the faculty kids who grew up around me. Almost every family has exactly 3 kids. So this promise was also only have 3. I mean, they chose their family based
Mm.
on this promise. And it's just so
Ugh.
utterly wrong. And there are videos of Dr. Bob saying, we will never forget the older faculty. They based it on forsake me not when I am old. They based it on a promise in scripture. And it doesn't seem that anybody who's still for the Bob Jones has a problem with this major broken promise. I don't understand that as an outsider.
Mm.
I don't understand how this is okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, just I can only imagine just the sense of betrayal and the pain of just dedicating decades of your time and even just money and
Mhm.
energy to this place and just being discarded like you're nothing, absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter. And just the lack of just gratitude and care. And I'm trying to remember, like, how many years did someone have to work at Bob Jones to qualify for the promise? I felt like there was like a year.
That's a good question. I don't know if there was a minimum back when my parents were there, but I think it started phasing out early 2000s. And so people who had just come on in the early 2000s were not in on the promise. And they were trying to keep it up for the other people. But when they say keep it up, they did not continue that campaign. They did not go to churches and say, we need money to not forget our elders or whatever. And all these people that are like, we're so sorry. I want to say, get on GoFundMe and start something. Like, I feel
Ooh,
it.
no, that is horrible. Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, don't tell me you're sorry. Go do something. I feel as though if I did it, it would look like I'm somehow getting money, but I'm happy to help come alongside anybody who would like to do anything instead of just talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I'm curious, like what are your theories on like what happened with the promise? Like why?
Well, ask my CPA husband what he thinks, because that money was designated and he has all the, you know, I think I have it here in an email actually. It was designated and nobody knows if they made it to 10 million, where the 10 million went, who got the 10 million. Nobody knows. So I'm trying to see if I can find it quickly here, and I can't. But I can give you all the things we wrote to
Mm.
Kevin Taylor and company if you would like it. We attached every kind of document that they ever sent, including the YouTube video where Dr. Bob is promising. And so I'm happy to make those things available to you so other people can look. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
the question is, where did the money go and why wasn't it restarted when you
Mhm.
raised millions later? What is stopping them right now from taking a Bible conference offering? There's
Yeah.
nothing stopping them. They're not even that many people. And you do run into the issue of there is almost like a Stockholm syndrome with these older faculty in that they will tell you, well, God is providing. And in many cases, it's the kids who are bending over backwards, working 3 extra jobs to provide. I guess you could call that God providing because the university didn't. But they don't want to say they want money because that would make the school look bad. But they desperately do need it. They cannot afford. I know someone who was on back campus living in her house. She knew they would take it away from her if they found out she was still there, and she had nowhere to go. The people who lived on campus, they have no homes. Those belong to the university. They can't afford rent somewhere else. So one of the ladies was living in a house. I don't know if there was electric, but there was no water, and she was sneaking to a neighbor's house to use the hose. This is an old retired person who gave her
Wow.
life to Bob Jones, and she was terrified that they would find out and that she would get booted off campus and have nowhere to live. Like, the stories are there. I have friends' parents who sold all their textbooks to buy food. I had friends' parents who couldn't afford a used car and had to walk everywhere. But yet they're not going to say a bad word about the university. It doesn't mean that they don't need the money.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that really does paint a picture of just a desperate situation people were in. And there's just kind of, I like that you use the word Stockholm syndrome in a way because I feel like that definitely is part of it. And I feel like there are definitely some people, especially those who dedicated decades so much time to it. I feel like there's like maybe imagining the conflicting feelings that are going inside. Like they're seeing these promises not being fulfilled, they're being treated this way, they're living in this fear and anxiety, afraid to speak up. So like there's just loyalty a lot of them have, but that internal conflict of, oh, but they're treating me this way. But then again, also they're stuck and they're like, oh, but if I do anything, then they can get rid of me just like that.
I
Like
think
I
that
don't matter.
for a lot of the older faculty, it was too much to think. Their mind couldn't go to the
Mm,
fact that maybe the Joneses weren't the people we thought they were. Maybe
mm,
this place wasn't as good as we thought it was. Because I would say a lot of them really believed, my dad really believed he was doing a good thing and he was serving kids. And to admit that your whole life maybe wasn't what you thought it was is too much for, I would say, most people. It's too much to
yeah.
think about. And I'm fortunate that my dad saw it in the end with a little help from his superiors. When my dad got fired, which also coincided exactly with the Grace report, so you can take that for what it's worth. When he got fired, his immediate superior called him in because he had a bad attitude about being fired. And this came up in their meeting with the administration also. And cleaning out my parents' house, I actually found an audio cassette tape of the meeting where my dad is getting fired.
Wow.
And it's really interesting. And at another time, when I have time, I might transcript that. But they would not give him a reason. Then in the end, they said, well, someone anonymous said something bad about you, but we can't tell you who or what.
Mm,
And then he got called in by his superior for having a bad attitude about the firing. And at that point, he couldn't win. And, a lot of his colleagues and some of these colleagues are now anti Bob Jones, which I find really hilarious that they did this to my dad and then just kind of skirted off and are now against the school. But they started talking about my dad's attitude and whispering, and they started vague posting on social media that, you know, the man who blah, 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 scripture, vague booking scripture at my dad. And so my dad got called in again. Well, faculty are saying that you did this. And I mean, it's just a
mm,
constant tattletale game. And so in the end, the two superiors above him decided he could not get a retirement party, the one he'd worked for 42 years.
yeah.
He could not get a party because he had a bad attitude. And while that stunk, That really was the last thing my dad needed to see before he left, to see, you know what? This is not the place that I thought it was. And these colleagues are not what I thought they were. And I mean, they were cutthroat in the music department, cutthroat back then.
Mm.
And some of them still are. But what's really funny is karma, in that both those superiors got fired in almost identical ways.
Wow.
And at least one of them was not given a retirement party. And it was a big deal. And
Mm.
I thought, yeah, how does it feel? Like, how many people did you do that to? And now that's happening to you. So I'm grateful at the end of the day that he didn't die thinking Bob Jones was what he thought originally that it was.
Wow. Wow, that's so powerful. And yeah, I did not know that about those two people. Wow, I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah,
That is,
I can't, the one, I'm not sure, but the higher up one, yeah, because I know family members were very upset that he did not get a retirement party.
mm.
And again, he took that away from a lot of people in a real haughty, pious way. I hope he gets it now. I sure haven't received apology. I don't know anyone else has.
Oh, dang. And so I'm curious. Well, I guess first I wanted to get a little bit into the old promise, but yeah, I feel like just knowing Bob Jones, they never want to admit any kind of wrongdoing
Yeah.
at all. And like, this, we've talked about it even just with the Grace report and their like fake apology and all this stuff. So I feel like, for Bob Jones to now say, "Oh, we're going to save this money for these, people, we didn't they wouldn't say we didn't provide for. They would frame it in some way that would not, that would make them look like the good guys. But like everyone would know, like, oh, why didn't that happen then? Like, why didn't they keep this problem? So yeah, Bob Jones, they never want to admit they're wrong in any way.
Well,
Um,
really, honestly, they cannot admit they're wrong, because
yeah.
if they were wrong, then they could have been wrong about a lot of other things, which
Oh,
means
yes.
you can't really listen to them
Mm.
fully, or you can at least question them. Because once you're wrong, you're vulnerable, and it's pride and it's control. They're never going to say they're sorry, because that would admit that they didn't have God's guidance in something.
Yeah, like, but I'm curious if you want to share about the new promise now at Bob Jones, what that is.
I know very little. I know that they got up and used the word several times right off the bat at opening meetings. And I think that it's not even really a promise, which is like, why did you pick the one word that you should probably not draw attention to? Promise. They did. They picked it and they said it over and over. This is not a great analogy, and people I know are going to have a heyday with this online. They're going to pick it apart. But it's like, if I loved every part about myself, I thought I was gorgeous and beautiful, except this snaggletooth. I don't like this snaggletooth. It would be like me on January 1st saying, attention, this year, I don't want anyone to look at this snaggletooth, okay? Look at everything else, but not this. Do we have it? This? No, not this. Everything else. I feel like saying the new promise was just begging for people to point out like one of the biggest flaws ever at that place. But people who even like the school admit that they don't like how the promise was handled. Why they use that word, I don't know, because it's not really a promise. But they said somewhere else in there in the faculty meeting, and I only listened to it once, that it is a calling. Bob Jones is a calling. It's not a decision you make. You're called to be there. So therefore, you're there forever. And sounds like the old promise. You're there forever and you do whatever they say, because it's a calling. It's not a choice. So now we're back real old school, where we're going to tell you should be here and you should shut up when you get here. So, and then I heard too that the opening services again were something with like real high pressured Baptist come to Jesus, like don't burn in eternity, come forward and get saved, rededicate your life. So I don't know how that's going to go over with this year's freshmen, but I
Oh,
guess time will tell.
yeah, it will. Oh my gosh, yeah, because
Oh,
with the new promise, I think it was Camille's What BJU blog, and like I saw a clip of it, and then I read the transcript, and like the first, I don't even think I finished the video. I was like, gosh, like, let me just quickly read the transcript, because like for me when I was listening, I'm like, this is just a bunch of like word salad, And his promise seems like it's intangible, so you can't track whether they keep it or not.
I don't know how it's a promise though, Andrew.
Yeah,
Is it a promise? I don't know.
I
Is
don't
it just
know
a new slogan?
either. It was
What's the
weird.
promise?
Yeah, I
Are
can't
they
even.
promising?
After reading
Oh
the
no.
transcript, I'm like, I don't know what.
Well, what was the old promise? There's a new one now. You're acknowledging there's a new one. So what was the old one? How did that end? So did you fulfill the old promise? Oh, okay. But there's a new promise now. So you're going to fulfill that one, right? Oh, unless things don't go your way. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I was reading, it was like I'm looking on her blog now to see if I can find it. But kind of the takeaway from it, it was like, what's different about our university is basically like our faculty and, what we do in the extra time behind the scenes and the counseling and the support. And we promise that we'll be there for anyways. It was, I'm gonna try to look for it. I'm
You
just gonna
promise we'll do what we're paid to do? I mean, you're
try.
getting a salary to be there, right?
Oh my gosh.
Promise to be there. Okay. Does that imply that you weren't there before? Because this is a new promise. So many things. It honestly would have been better to just call it we promise or something, not the new promise, because the new begs the old. And again, like just call it we promise to do this and that, not the new promise. Even if you're not thinking about the promise, you're like, well, why is this new? Have you not fulfilled promises before on anything, not just the promise? It's just one of the worst marketing things I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot, I feel like.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Because I'm looking at like Camille's blog right now. But yeah, we prepare you to pursue a higher calling. BJU prepares each student to pursue a higher calling, anchored in truth, mentored in wisdom, and strengthened in faith. This promise matters because it reorients the college away from self-invention and toward a God-ordained purpose and gives language to what makes BJU different. While calling is centered on career or skill or personal ambition, a higher calling is rooted in God's purpose grounded in scripture. So basically, it's like, oh, we're not just going to prepare you for a career. We're going to prepare you for a higher calling, which
Right. They're
I,
back to that old theory, which I'm sure will go really well with what generation is this now? They're not millennials. What are they? What are they?
Gen
Z?
Z.
Z.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll go over really well with Z.
Oh my gosh. And maybe even some Gen Alpha I don't know if
Oh
Gen
yeah.
Alpha is getting in
Yeah.
there
I'm sure
yet.
that will go over very well.
Oh my gosh. Because, like, yeah. And it's like, it's something that's intangible. You know what I mean? None of that can be measured. Oh, yeah. Do you have anything else to say about
Um,
the new promise and all that stuff?
no, I do want to say this though. So Bob Jones, when it comes to what happened to my parents and how they lived up here for 3.5 years before my dad died, and you talk about people failing them. I mean, everybody failed them.
Mm.
Almost everybody failed them. And my husband and I were the only people with boots on the ground taking care of them besides the assisted living. And it wasn't just Bob Jones people, although they are guilty of that. Nobody, no faculty came up to see them. Nobody was sending cards. I think I know of 2 people who sent cards. Nobody called me. Same 2 people did, but nobody else called me to say, how are your parents? Can we do anything? I would have said, yes, send them a card, send them some food, send them something they like. They just were forgotten. But even worse than being forgotten by Bob Jones, because they had left there a few years before, was Mount Calvary Baptist Church. That's where my dad was the music leader for 45 years. And as soon as they fired him, and again, he didn't like it and he didn't want to sit under the person who had shoved him out in a really unethical way. So they started going to a little local church. That was it. They were dead to them. And the whole time they were up here in Ohio, nothing. I can't even tell you how many times I called Mark Minnick and said, please call me. I want to give you an update on my parents. Never. The 2 weeks my dad was in hospice, please call me. My dad is not doing well. Never. I called his secretary multiple times. Nothing. I didn't see one card from him in their stuff when I cleaned it out. And I would have seen it. If it was there, it would be there. There was nowhere else for it to go. And so it was just really sort of shocking how those people just forgot my parents
Wow.
because they moved out of Greenville, out of
Mm.
sight, out of mind. Even when they were in Greenville and very sick, no one was checking on them. One person was checking on them, and they were really sick. So I have a real problem with Mount Calvary. And then in the end, after all that, we had a funeral for my dad. I mean, my dad asked my pastor up here if he would bury him because, I mean, he knew no one down there was, I mean, they'd abandoned him down there.
Mm.
And he said, yes, of course I will do that or whatever. So that's what happened. We had the funeral up here and it was lovely. We played all hymns my dad would have liked. It's on a live stream. You can still watch it. We had a few mission team members. I will say there were some mission team members who came and visited them quite a few times. And that was it. It wasn't faculty, staff. It wasn't Mount Calvary people, but it was some mission team kids who met on their mission trip. But we had some mission team members seeing this, whatever. We had the former governor of Ohio, Kasich, speak at my dad's funeral. It was a lovely service.
Wow.
And it was live stream. So Mount Calvary people were watching. Well, they not only didn't like it, they called the one faculty member who did come up. They called him and got on his case for going to the funeral and for playing the piano there. And they said, you didn't have permission to do this. And he said, he was my best friend. Why would I get permission? So they said, well, you didn't have permission to be gone on a Sunday. And you didn't have permission to play in a church that has drums. And then they told him and everyone else in Greenville there that I had dishonored my dad's legacy by having the funeral service in a church that had drums. Now, did we play the drums? No, we did not play the drums. Were they maybe in the background of one shot? Maybe. But, you know, like they still think they have the right to say that after they've not been part of my parents' life for 5 years.
Wow.
And it was so bad. Another faculty member who did check up with me several times wanted to have a memorial for my dad. And I was scared to death to go down for that because I know people don't like me. I wasn't born yesterday. And I didn't know what people would say to me. But mostly I was terrified that nobody would come. And then I would be all sad again that my dad who gave his life to these places and no one showed up. I mean, I was really, I get sad just even thinking about it. Like that was what I was most nervous about, was I was going to go down there and there's going to be nobody. And there were about 130 people, which is still a little sad when you think about my dad and his legacy. But they had this thing, and behind my back, I didn't know that the guy who had it at White Oak Baptist Church across the street from school, and they very generously let us use their building, Minnick did something like kind of unheard of at Mount Calvary. And I have the video clip. I can give it to you so people can watch it. He basically threw this guy under the bus and said, well, we wanted to have it here, but we don't have things on Sundays because, and then he tries to justify why they don't have things on Sundays. And he's like, because just, well, you know, it's just, you know, it's a lot, and, or something along those lines. And so he basically was like, well, we didn't want it to be at White Oak. And they made this whole drama about my dad and his memorial. They have had no part of his life, none, except during hospice, they did listen to one person who put that my dad was in hospice and then called my mother, who is mentally ill, and told her my dad was in hospice. We hadn't told her yet, but Mount Calvary did in their prayer request manual, and they would not take it down. I called them and I begged them to take it down. So here they are fighting about where my dad's funeral is. And I don't even know anything about it. It's just so Greenville. They've got to find drama somewhere. And so Minnick graciously let people out of church to go to this memorial. He stopped his sermon a little early to let people go over to this thing. Now, he came in late and he left early. He just stood in the back. I don't think he got to hear my eulogy. But there were a handful, maybe 30, 40 maybe, Mount Calvary people. And remember, they got out of church early to come. There's 500, 600 of them. And there were a lot of younger ones there. And at the end, none of those young kids came up to me. Nobody came up to me. I'm the only family there. Another Bob Jones faculty rushed up to my friend who is from Russia and said, right by me, was first up to us. It said, oh, I just wanted to come. I knew you'd be here. So that's the only reason I came to this. Never spoke to me, spoke to my friend who we wanted to catch there.
Wow.
And a lady from Mount Calvary came up and she took umbrage with something I said in my eulogy, which was, When people failed my dad, when institutions and churches failed my dad, the God that he believed in did not fail him. And she did not like those statements. And she came right up to me and she said, well, it was time for your dad to be fired. It was time. He wasn't doing his job. And I said, so and so, this is not the time or place, and other people are around me. And she just keeps going. Well, he wouldn't play the alto part more than once. And I'm like, please go volunteer at a prison or soup kitchen and get a real life. Like, I don't care. I don't care. Like, this is not the place. The memorial to the only family member is not the time to come up and tell me my dad only played the alto line one time. But again, like, this is these people, and they make it about themselves. It wasn't about my dad. It wasn't about me. No one handed me a card. No one. And then there was another faculty member who was awful to me. He was awful to my parents. His wife was even worse to me, who was just chasing me down the entire time. I'd see him. He's trying to come. I'd run. I finally ran to the bathroom because I was like, I don't have it in me. I just don't have it in me to be nice to one more person. So, yeah. So it felt good to get it over.
Like, that just like blows my mind, just the treatment that you experience at the memorial. Like, oh my goodness. Like, it just, the lack of compassion, the tone deafness, lack of awareness, the audacity,
Yeah. Now I did have some friends come and they were wonderful. And
of course, yeah.
Reception, and there were some wonderful friends. And I did get some apologies along the way. But I do want to say, since our last podcast that mentioned Mount Calvary, I have had more Mount Calvary people reach out to me than I've had all the years combined for Bob Jones. They're listening. There are people listening to these podcasts. There are pastors' wives who are still very entrenched in fundamentalism listening to your podcast because they told me. There are people still at Mount Calvary listening to these podcasts. People are listening and they're starting to get it. And I can't tell you how many victims have come back, have come forward out of Mount Calvary. It is frightening. And a lot of them are children or were children. And I don't even know what to say about it all. It's been shocking how many people have come forward.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I did not realize people from those circles were listening. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, I hope that justice will be served with what has been happening and has happened at Mount Calvary for sure. And as we're kind of in this kind of topic area, I was curious what you would like to share about the 10-year anniversary mark of the Grace Report being released.
Actually, I just had a little bit, so it shouldn't take too long. So it's been 10 years since Grace, and there was a story run. A lot of the victims weren't super happy with the story. It made it seem Boz was very positive about Bob Jones. And even though in the end of the article, it did talk about how very little has been done on the university's behalf, because it was so positive in the beginning, it didn't sit well with a lot of victims. So, and it was a little disappointing that Greenville didn't try a little harder after the 10 years. But I wound up, okay, so this is what's happened since there. Since Grace came out in the last 5 years, when Pettit was there and then he wasn't there and then he wanted to come back and then he didn't want to come back and then he wanted to come back one more time. I can't remember the full story, but there was a yo-yo effect. This group online who called themselves the Positives, which always makes me laugh.
Yes.
They came out and they essentially, what they did is they normalized trash talking Dr. Bob III. But they were very cliquey, like they would only allow people they wanted to be in the group, and they could talk negative about him, but you couldn't say anything negative about anything else unless it was an approved negative topic. It was confusing and it was real, again, it was very cliquey. So then after that kind of wore off, and then there was this new group called the New Contract. That's what it started as. I don't know what it's called now. I think it's had some name changes. And it normalized trash talking Dr. Bob even more, and then other things too. And it seemed to be letting like everybody in and not kicking people out. And so I joined in the beginning selfishly just because I wanted to see what it was about. And also it seemed as though people were listening, and I wanted to get out there the grace report and the promise. Those have been my two goals, from day one. I'm like a broken record. And I think if there's anybody I can tell, it might be this group of grads who's now disgruntled with the school. So sure enough, some of the leadership in there actually have apologized in other places on social media for their involvement with Bob Jones and for sticking up for Bob Jones, etc. So I stayed in there because I felt like this seems like there are people who are listening. I got quite a few apologies from people in that group. And so if you were to say in a nutshell, it's been 10 years since Grace, what is encouraging and what is discouraging? What's encouraging is that people seem to be listening now because of these new groups. And there are more people than ever disgruntled with Bob Jones. People that maybe they took a break forever, but now their kids in college and they briefly considered Bob Jones. They are listening and they are not liking what they're hearing. So that's encouraging because, nobody ever listened to us, it felt like. And a lot of us risked a lot coming out when we did. We knew we'd be shunned. We knew all this other stuff, and we still told the truth. But what's discouraging is the fact that it took 10 years. That's what's discouraging, and that not everyone is still listening. Again, like I said, some people lost everything when they came out as victims. They lost their church, they lost their friends, everything. And no one is really losing anything right now because it's the popular thing to do, But
Yeah.
I'd say overall, at least people are listening, even if it took so long. At least there are some people listening. So, and a little bit on the Grace Report, I found out just a little bit more about my story that I didn't know before because I still had a little bit of my parents' house to clean out when we last talked. So I found an interesting letter that my parents wrote to Dr. Bob III because the guy who molested me, they made him step down from dorm counselor briefly. And then by the time I was in my last school year of student teaching, Dr. Bob had decided that he wanted him to fly in the private jet and go around singing to churches to like fundraise for the school. So basically, that was like, he used to take faculty voice, like my dad and Grant Lewis. He would take faculty singers to do that. It was a perk. You got to fly, you got meals, and you got to sing in a church. So he wanted to take this guy that had molested me because he was popular at the time. And his voice was very nice. So my parents wrote this letter on August 30th of 2001, right after I graduated. And it basically said, we hope you know our level of commitment to the ministry under you, et cetera, but you must not understand or remember what happened with this guy. Like, we got death threats. His dad threatened to sue us and the school, this and that. And he got kicked out of Mount Calvary, et cetera. And now you're letting him fly on your plane. And I have Dr. Bob's response. And I didn't have it until recently. It was in a box I just hadn't gone through. And here it is. But basically it says, I have the highest love and regard for you both, blah, blah, blah. You stated you don't harbor bitterness, and you're fully aware of the biblical teaching about the damage that comes from the sin of bitterness. At the same time, it appears you do desire a stigma to remain cast over so-and-so. I see no reason whatsoever that he should not go on with his life, why he should not be used to sing, and why he cannot have a ministry. And basically says, whatever happened with you is private. And all I know at this point is that a young man and his bride need to get on with their lives.
Oh, God.
We see nothing in them that says they're not upright before the Lord. It appears to me that what plagues, whatever, it's water under the bridge. The university is not involved, dispute or whatever. Yeah. And so it basically said, F you.
Oh, my
Gonna happen.
gosh.
I also have some new letters from Bennett about how awful they thought so-and-so was. I have letters from Berg saying they're so sorry about this. And I found the original letter. This was one of the death threats that we got, which it's in hot pink because they didn't want a Xerox copy at the time, but it's on here. It's a bunch of different things. And that was one of the letters that, they're referring to in this correspondence. So in a nutshell, I think that guy got to sing with Dr. Bob, and then Dr. Gustafson wrote an opera, and he included all the male faculty, but he also wrote a lead for this guy. And so my dad, I think the beginning of the end for him was, my dad went to Gustafson and said, I don't know if you know what he did to my daughter or all this stuff or what his dad did to the school, but I'm not going to sing with him. And so Gustafson wrote him out of the opera. Every other voice member was in it. And my dad
Wow.
was not in the opera, and that guy was. And I really feel like that was the beginning of the end for my dad, all the way down now to like, my dad's not a team player. He doesn't deserve this, that, whatever. But the point is, this stuff did happen. It doesn't matter if Dr. Bob writes and says, well, it's water under a bridge. These things did happen. And he is still not acknowledging that in the Grace Report. Dr. Bob has gone on to say he didn't know of any instances of abuse. I mean, clearly, this is dated September 5th, 2001. I mean, clearly he did know. And he knew people. He knew me. And he knew this guy. So when I hear him still talking about, well, the Grace Report was only 20 measly people out of whatever, it just makes me laugh because it's flat out not true.
Wow. Oh, thank you for sharing all of that. And was there anything else you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, just for people who have graduated from the school, I mean, it is not too late to help out some of these older faculty. I can help direct you to people who are too embarrassed to ask for help themselves because I've talked to their kids and their kids will tell you they need help. It's not too late to do something about the retirees who were stuck in the transition. And again, if you're feeling stuck within a group, within a church system where you can't get out, just reach out to somebody on one of these podcasts. I always put my email on. Other people within your church and school systems have my contact info, and I'm happy to just listen if that's what you'd like. But there's hope on the other side. I thank God every day that we got out of fundamentalism. It has opened doors for me that would never have been opened if we had stayed at the church we were at. I am now doing art and styling for music videos for rock bands, for Grammy Award-winning rock bands. I never would have thought that as a graduate of Ogden University. I'm doing all kinds of fun stuff in my business and meeting people. And again, none of these things would have happened. I have extremely well blessed, if you want to say, life. I have a freedom now in Christ that I never even was close to before. I'm able to give my time to serve and work in ways that I've never been able to do in those Bob Jones circles. So it is not too late. You can still get out. You can still have meaning in your life and have a really good life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And that's one of the things I love about your story because I remember like when we had first met, I was like, wow, like you've gone on to do these amazing things. And when you leave that world, they try to scare you into like horrible things will happen. You won't be, blessed, or this and this will happen. Your life's gonna fall apart. But it's always great to see examples of people who have gone on, like follow their dreams, ambitions, goals, follow their talents, and just have succeeded. So I just want to say that too. And because in fundamentalism, one of the things is like they constrict and like confine, I feel like like the potential that you have. And I think it's just inspiring to see people kind of break out of those confines and, do what they feel is right or is true to them on their path and just express it and get in tap with themselves and spread it all around. And I feel like that's part of your story that I love just so much too. Just kind of like the after and the good things that have happened. Well, thank you again so much for coming on this show. I always enjoy our conversations. And yeah, for people listening, thank you so much for your support. But this was Beyond BJU. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond BJU. My Patreon supporters allow me to do this work, and I am so grateful for them. If you could join my Patreon community, it would be greatly appreciated. But if you feel you cannot do that, if you could give the podcast a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because this helps other listeners just like you discover the show. Thank you.